The last thing I heard before the dirt covered my face was my sister's laughter. Not the kind of laughter that comes from joy, this was sharper, higher, almost relieved. Rain pounded the overturned car, glass shards glittering against the mud. My body was half trapped beneath the twisted door, lungs burning from the river water I'd swallowed. I tasted blood and betrayal in the same breath. They said it was an accident, a late-night drive gone wrong. But even as the headlights faded and thunder drowned my screams, I knew what it really was, a burial. A quiet way to erase the daughter who knew too much. I had found the papers a week earlier. Fake contracts, falsified accounts, my father's forged signature. My sister and her fiancé were selling pieces of the company while our father lay dying. I'd confronted her, naive enough to think truth mattered. And now here I was, suffocating beneath wet earth, their secret sealed with my last breath. The shovel struck mud inches from my cheek. Each thud grew duller as the weight pressed down. I wanted to cry out, to tell her I forgave her, to ask why, but my mouth filled with soil. Somewhere above me she whispered, "You should have stayed quiet, May." When the final clump hit my chest, darkness closed in. I didn't pray for rescue. I prayed for return. I prayed for the strength to haunt every smile that betrayed me. Time lost meaning. When I woke, it wasn't to angels or mercy. It was to pain, sharp, cold, relentless. My fingers twitched first, scraping against wet roots. I clawed upward, each movement tearing skin, each breath stealing air from the grave that refused to keep me. When I broke through the surface, the night greeted me with silence. The car was gone. So were they. Only the rain remained, washing the mud from my face like baptism. I lay there trembling, half alive, half ghost, staring at the indifferent sky. The forest around me was quiet except for the river's hiss. I tried to stand, but my body collapsed again. My legs were bruised, my ribs felt cracked, and my voice came out in a whisper too hoarse to recognize. I crawled. Through mud, through branches that tore at my arms. Every movement whispered the same vow, not yet. I found the road by dawn, miles from the mansion gates. A truck driver stopped, eyes widening at the sight of me. He took me to a hospital, asked my name. I lied. Lien. My middle name. The one my family never used. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. I wanted to tell them luck had nothing to do with it. Rage did. When I saw the morning news on the small TV above my bed, my stomach turned cold. Heiress Lin May presumed dead after tragic car accident. Funeral arrangements tomorrow. There was my picture, smiling, polished, dead. They had done it. They buried me in every way that counted. And the world believed them. That night, I slipped out of the hospital wearing another patient's coat. My reflection in the glass door startled me. Hair matted, eyes hollow, skin ghost pale. I looked like the corpse they declared. So I decided to become her. For the next 3 years I was a ghost. I hid in nameless cities, taking odd jobs that didn't ask for IDs or pasts. I mended clothes, washed dishes, learned to sew better than anyone. The rhythm of the needle became my heartbeat, the thread my lifeline. Each stitch whispered the same promise. One day I'll return. Sometimes, in the dark corners of cheap hostels, I heard laughter again, hers faint and cruel. I would wake drenched in sweat, clawing at the sheets as if still buried. But the nightmares kept me alive. They reminded me what I had to do. One winter morning, while delivering repaired dresses to a boutique, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My hair had grown long again, darker than before, framing a face sharper, colder. My eyes no longer looked lost, they looked patient. I realized then that survival wasn't enough. I didn't crawl out of a grave just to hide. I would rise higher than the hands that buried me. I would shine so bright they'd have to see the ghost they created, wrapped in diamonds, walking through the front door they slammed shut. When I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Its warmth hit my face like a promise kept. I whispered into the wind, "Wait for me." And somewhere, in the distance where the mansion stood tall on its stolen fortune, I imagined my sister's laughter faltering for the first time. Because the girl they buried was gone. What crawled out of that grave was something else entirely. Alive, breathing, and unstoppable. And when I returned, I would make sure they recognized every diamond I wore as a mirror of their sin. Wait for me. I'll come home shining. 3 years of silence tastes like iron. That's how long it's been since the world buried me. 3 years since I clawed my way out of that grave with nothing but rage and a new name. Now every morning begins the same way. The hiss of a sewing machine, the ache in my fingers, and the hum of a city that doesn't care who you used to be. I live in a basement apartment that smells of wet concrete and fabric dye. When it rains, water seeps under the door, and I place old newspapers to stop the flood. The walls tremble whenever a train passes above, but I've grown used to it. The noise keeps the ghosts quiet. No one here knows my past. To them I'm Lien, the quiet seamstress who works too hard and talks too little. At night, when the others leave the workshop, I stay behind, repairing dresses for women who will never know the name of the hands that made them beautiful. Sometimes I imagine one of those gowns ending up at a Lin family event, brushing against the same marble floors where I once walked barefoot as a child. The thought makes me smile. Bittersweet. Dangerous. Every time I prick my finger with a needle, a drop of blood stains the fabric. A small reminder that every stitch I sew brings me closer to home. But the nights are cruel. The city is colder after midnight. The wind slithers through broken window panes, whispering with the same voice I heard above my grave. Stay quiet, May. I don't sleep much anymore. Sometimes I dream of jasmine, my mother's perfume, and wake choking on the memory. Other times I dream of laughter echoing through marble halls while I suffocate beneath the ground. They're still living, still celebrating, still smiling for the cameras. And I'm still here, mending the world's rags like some forgotten ghost. I thought revenge would come quickly, that I'd rise faster. But survival takes time, and rebuilding from ashes requires patience sharper than any blade. One rainy evening as I packed my tools, the old landlady knocked on my door. Mail for you, she said, handing me an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single business card, embossed, silver lettering. Aurora Design Collective, Talent Recruitment Division. On the back, one sentence. Your work speaks for itself. Come to 118 Rue Montrose at 9 a.m. Paris. I froze. Paris. The fashion capital of the world. No one in their right mind would offer something like this to an anonymous seamstress in a basement. Which meant someone knew me. The next morning I packed everything I owned into one suitcase. A few tools, my mother's photo, and the broken pearl hairpin I'd worn the night of the crash. When the plane lifted off, the clouds below looked like the grave I'd escaped. Only this time I wasn't sinking, I was soaring. Paris was too bright, too clean. It smelled of coffee, rain, and second chances. I met my recruiter, a tall man in a charcoal suit with eyes like frost. You're Lien? He asked, glancing at my calloused hands. Yes, I said carefully. Your work was sent anonymously. Exceptional. Who taught you? My mother, I lied. He studied me for a long moment, then slid a folder across the table. We'll fund your designs. Full creative control. In return, he paused, leaning forward. When you rise, promise me they'll know who buried you. My blood ran cold. How do you know about them? I know injustice when I see it, he said softly. And I know power when it's been stolen. Use both. That night I couldn't sleep. His words looped in my mind. A melody of vengeance disguised as opportunity. When I stepped onto the runway floor for the first time, under white lights and gleaming mirrors, I didn't see models. I saw ghosts wearing silk. Each gown shimmered like memory. Delicate, dangerous, unforgettable. People whispered my name, Lien. They said it like a secret worth keeping. Success didn't come overnight, but it came. Slowly. With every collection, the world began to notice. The name Aurora spread across headlines, magazine covers, and glittering parties I never attended. I built an empire in silence, the same silence they left me to die in. But wealth didn't soften the ache. Each applause reminded me of the voices that never said sorry. Each bouquet of roses reminded me of the flowers they threw on my coffin. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in a mirror, perfectly dressed, face powdered, lips painted red, and I'd wonder if my sister would even recognize me now. I'd whisper her name under my breath, testing its sharpness like a blade. Lena. The sound of it still burned. One evening during a private gala, I saw her name printed in a magazine headline on the table beside my glass of wine. Lin Group Air celebrates expansion after tragic family loss. There she was, smiling beside my former fiancé. Hand on his chest, diamond glittering on her finger. I felt the same cold I'd felt in the ground years ago. My hands tightened around the glass until it shattered. Blood slipped between my fingers, bright and warm. A woman beside me gasped. "You're bleeding." I smiled faintly. "It's only old wounds reopening." I excused myself, walked out into the rain-soaked street, and tilted my face to the sky. 3 years ago I crawled out of the earth. Now I was ready to rise from the ashes. I looked at my reflection in a puddle. The woman staring back wore confidence like armor and sorrow like diamonds. I whispered to her, "They took everything, but they gave me something greater, purpose." And when the thunder cracked overhead, I smiled, because I wasn't buried anymore. I was becoming the storm that would drown them all. He asked me to promise that they'd know who buried me. I would. But first I'd make sure they remembered exactly who I was when I came back. Before the grave, before the lies, before the world turned its back on me, there was laughter. My laughter. My sister's. Our father's gentle voice humming through the garden as jasmine swayed in the sunlight. That was the life I once called mine. A life so perfect, it almost made me forget how easily perfection cracks when greed seeps in. I used to believe family meant safety. That love, even flawed, had boundaries no one would cross. But I was wrong. The people who held me closest were the ones who dug deepest when it was time to bury me. Father was the heart of the Lin family empire, stern, proud, but soft when he looked at me. I was his eldest, the daughter who understood numbers and fabrics, who designed our first fashion line under his name. My sister Lena was the face of the brand, beautiful, charming, always the center of every photograph. We worked together once. I handled the sketches, she handled the press. It should have been harmony. But success breeds hunger, and hunger turns family into competition. When father fell ill, the vultures came quietly, investors with polite smiles, my uncle whispering false loyalty, and Lena standing beside them like a fragile flower everyone rushed to protect. I remember sitting by father's bedside, feeding him soup as he whispered, "Don't let them divide you, May. The company belongs to both my daughters." I nodded, promising I wouldn't let him down. That was the last promise I ever broke. After his death, the house turned cold. The jasmine wilted, and Lena began to change. She started attending board meetings I wasn't invited to, hosting strategic dinners with men who praised her intelligence while their eyes lingered too long on her dress. I tried to talk to her once to remind her what father wanted. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The world moves fast, May. Maybe too fast for people who cling to ideals. I didn't understand until I found the documents, hidden beneath her vanity drawer, sealed with our company's golden crest. Fake export invoices, offshore transfers, signatures that looked like father's but weren't. The night I confronted her, rain hammered the windows like warning fists. She didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, swirling it lazily. "Do you know why father trusted you more?" she asked. "Because you reminded him of mother. Soft, predictable, easy to love." Her voice cut like glass. "You think kindness builds empires? No, May. Power does. And power doesn't wait for permission." I still remember the taste of that moment, metallic, bitter, final. She warned me not to go public. "You'll ruin everything he built," she said. "Let me fix this." But fixing meant stealing, and silence meant complicity. I couldn't let that happen. I took the files and drove to the company lawyer that night. I never reached him. The rain came down in sheets, blurring the road. The car lights behind me were too close, the engine's roar too loud. And then the impact. Metal against metal. The world flipped. Water. Mud. Darkness. I remember her face through the shattered window, expressionless, almost calm, as if she were watching a performance reach its expected end. I thought she'd pull me out. I was wrong. They buried me under the lie they called grief. I saw the funeral photos later online. Her in a black dress, tears glistening like diamonds. The perfect performance. "She was my sister," the caption quoted. "My heart will never heal." I used to cry when I saw that image. Now I only laugh. Because grief can be faked. But guilt? That leaves shadows no amount of makeup can hide. It took years for me to understand that love and betrayal are twins. They wear the same face until the knife turns. My compassion blinded me once. It won't again. The woman I was gentle, forgiving, hopeful died in that car. The one who crawled out learned to survive without mercy. Now when I design a gown I think of her, the girl buried in the mud. Each dress I sew glitters like armor, stitched from pain and defiance. Each diamond I wear reflects the pieces of the life they tried to shatter. People in Paris call me Aurora now, the woman reborn from darkness. But Aurora isn't a name. It's a warning. It means the night doesn't last forever. And the dawn is coming, dressed in silk and vengeance. When I walk back into that mansion, I won't be the daughter they remember. I'll be the ghost they tried to silence, wrapped in beauty they can't afford, carrying the truth they can't bury. I buried the girl they used. I was building the woman they'd fear. The night my designs walked the Paris runway, the cameras flashed so bright I almost forgot how darkness used to feel. Almost. The models moved like shadows in silver light, wrapped in gowns I had bled over. The collection was called Resurrection. Every thread whispered my story without speaking my name. When the final spotlight dimmed and the applause rose like thunder, I closed my eyes. For a moment I wasn't May or Lien or the girl they'd buried. I was the woman who crawled out and learned how to shine. Backstage, reporters crowded around, eager faces and greedy microphones. "Who is Aurora Lynn?" one asked. "A mystery," another replied before I could speak. "She came from nowhere and conquered Paris in a year." I smiled, letting them chase illusions. The truth was too heavy to fit in their headlines. Later that night, as champagne glasses clinked and congratulations poured in, I stood by the window of the grand ballroom, watching the rain trace streaks on the glass. It was raining again, like the night they buried me. The world has a cruel sense of poetry. A familiar voice broke through the crowd. "Aurora Lynn?" I turned. The man from before, the mysterious investor, was there, a faint smile on his lips. "You did it," he said. I nodded. "Now it begins." He looked out at the flashes of cameras. "They're watching. Are you ready for them to remember you?" "I'm counting on it." 2 weeks later, headlines in Asia screamed my name. Aurora, the Chinese designer who dazzled Europe. I could feel the tremor ripple through the Lin family from an ocean away. Then one morning, while reviewing sketches in my atelier, my assistant rushed in breathless, holding a tablet. "Miss Aurora, look." On the screen was an invitation, gold foil, engraved with a familiar emblem. Lin Group Annual Gala, celebrating the engagement of Miss Lena Lin and Mr. Zhang Wei. My hands went still. Wei, the man who once promised me forever, who swore he'd never let anyone hurt me. The same man who helped shovel dirt over my grave. A laugh escaped before I could stop it, soft, hollow, bitter. "Looks like ghosts are invited now," I murmured. That night I sat in front of the mirror, diamonds laid out like soldiers before battle. I touched the scar hidden beneath my hairline, the one no makeup could ever erase. I whispered to my reflection, "Time to go home." Paris had given me a name. Now China would remember it. I arrived at the airport unannounced. The air back home smelled the same, thick with smog and memories. The closer the car drove toward the Lin estate, the louder my heart pounded. The roads were cleaner now, the mansion freshly painted, the gates taller. But the jasmine still bloomed along the fence, their scent twisting my stomach. When the guard stopped me, I handed them a gold card embossed with my new identity. "Ms. Aurora Lin," I said, lips curved in calm defiance. Their eyes widened. The name Lin unlocked the gates without question. The mansion glittered that night, filled with laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. I stepped inside, the echo of my heels slicing through the music. Every chandelier reflected a different version of me. The girl they mourned, the ghost they denied, the woman they never expected to see again. I could feel their eyes on me before I even reached the center of the room. The whispers began. "Who is she? Is that Aurora Lin? She looks familiar." And then my mother turned. The same elegant posture, the same soft pearls around her neck. Her gaze froze mid-motion, her hand trembling just slightly. Recognition flickered across her face like lightning behind clouds. My sister stood beside her, radiant in a gold gown, the picture of success. For a split second her smile faltered. Then she smoothed it over with practiced grace. She walked toward me, glass of champagne in hand. "Ms. Aurora," she said sweetly. We're honored by your presence. I tilted my head. Congratulations on your engagement, Miss Lin. Her lips twitched. You've heard of us? Hard not to. The Lin family is famous for its ability to rise from tragedy. The air between us thinned. For a heartbeat, I saw confusion flicker in her eyes, like she was staring at a reflection she didn't understand. My mother joined her, clutching her arm too tightly. You remind me of someone, she whispered. I smiled. Perhaps a ghost. As the night went on, I played my part, the powerful designer seeking collaboration with the Lin Group. The irony was delicious. They talked of profit, I talked of legacy. They bragged about their influence, I spoke of rebirth. And all the while my sister watched me like a hawk, her fingers tight around her glass. When the toasts began, she stepped forward, voice smooth and sweet. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass toward the crowd. And to the past which taught us strength. I lifted mine in return, smiling just enough for the cameras. To the dead, I said softly, letting my voice carry, who never stay buried. The room fell silent for a moment, just long enough for my words to find their mark. Her smile trembled. My mother's glass shattered. And I knew then the game had truly begun. The next morning, I stood at the gates of the Lin mansion again, this time in daylight. The jasmine smelled sweeter now, mocking almost. Reporters were still camped near the drive, their cameras angled toward the house that once buried me. Inside, I was no longer an intruder. I was an honored guest, the famed designer Aurora Lin, whose name had doubled the stock value of every brand she touched. Power makes the cruel forget their crimes. The housekeeper bowed. Miss Aurora, Master Lin requested your presence for breakfast. Master Lin. My lips twitched. They meant my father's brother, the man who had overseen the will that erased me. He rose from his seat as I entered the dining hall, his movement stiff with age but his smile too polished. Miss Aurora, it's a privilege to finally meet the genius everyone's talking about. Please, I said, slipping into the chair opposite him. Just Aurora. He studied my face. You bear a remarkable resemblance to my late niece. I've heard she was unforgettable. I let the words hang like smoke. Breakfast unfolded in brittle politeness. He asked about Paris. I asked about the Lin Group's manufacturing ethics. When he began to sweat, I knew I was inside the cracks already. Before I left, he said, my daughters will be thrilled to collaborate. Of course, I replied. After all, family should work together. I caught my reflection in the silver teapot. Eyes cold, smile perfect. For a heartbeat, I almost saw the girl I used to be staring back, warning me not to go too far. But it was too late for warnings. That afternoon, I visited their design division under the guise of partnership. Employees whispered as I walked past, half awed, half afraid. On the wall hung a portrait of the Lin sisters, painted before the accident. My sister's hand rested on my shoulder in that picture. I traced the outline lightly, then let my fingers fall. In the boardroom she was waiting. Lena. She looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful, immaculate, her smile rehearsed to the last muscle. Only her eyes betrayed her. Miss Aurora, she greeted, standing to shake my hand. We're honored. Likewise, I said. Her skin was warm, but her pulse fluttered under my fingers. She launched into a presentation. Numbers, trends, markets, but her voice trembled whenever I met her gaze. Finally she asked, why choose us? With your influence you could partner with anyone. I leaned back. Because I believe in history. And in unfinished stories. The room went still. Even the projector's hum sounded nervous. After the meeting, she followed me into the corridor. We've met before, haven't we? I turned slightly. You tell me. Her breath hitched. It's just your eyes. I smiled. Maybe you're seeing ghosts again, Miss Lin. That night, the mansion hosted a private dinner to celebrate the new partnership. The chandeliers glowed gold, and laughter spilled through the halls that once echoed with my screams. I moved among them like a shadow draped in diamonds. My mother approached slowly, her movements fragile. Miss Aurora, she murmured. Forgive an old woman's foolish question. Were you ever here before? I think, I said softly, I was always meant to be here. She blinked back, tears, confused, frightened, or perhaps remembering. At the head of the table, Lena raised her glass. To our future, she said brightly. I lifted mine. And to the past, I answered. Our glasses touched. The sound rang sharp as a blade. Later, when the music faded and the guests dispersed, I found a single rose laid on my bedroom pillow, fresh, crimson, perfect. Beneath it, a note in neat handwriting. Thank you for reminding me what warmth feels like. It wasn't Lena's writing. It was his. The investor. The man who had funded my rise from the ashes. For the first time that night my heart wavered. I had spent 3 years learning to live without trust. Now someone was giving it back and I didn't know how to hold it. I stepped out onto the balcony. The garden below shimmered under moonlight, just as it had the night of the crash. Inside, the house hummed with false laughter. Outside, the wind carried the scent of roses and rain. I whispered into the dark. You buried me with lies. I came back dressed in truth. Then I turned toward the mansion windows glowing behind me, the same light that had once blinded me, and smiled. The woman they killed was gone. The one who returned would make them remember every grain of dirt they threw over her. And tonight was only the beginning. The whispers began the next morning. It always starts with whispers, too quiet to chase, too sharp to ignore. She looks like her. Impossible, she died. Are you sure? By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into headlines. Who is Aurora Lynn? The designer whose face mirrors a dead heiress. Scandal in the Lynn Empire, ghost or genius? My phone buzzed endlessly, articles flooding every feed. The mansion staff stopped meeting my eyes. Even the guards, once mechanical, now bowed deeper, as if afraid I might vanish again. Lena called an emergency press conference that afternoon. Of course she did. She was always best at pretending to be in control when everything was slipping through her fingers. The conference hall gleamed like a stage. Cameras flashed, microphones blinked, and the family sat like royalty awaiting judgment. I stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, disguised beneath a wide hat and black veil, listening. Miss Lynn, a reporter shouted. People are saying the designer Aurora Lynn bears a striking resemblance to your late sister. Any comment? Lena laughed, forced, brittle. Resemblance is not resurrection. My sister passed away 3 years ago. I wish her peace, not gossip. Peace. The word twisted like glass in my chest. Then another voice cut through the noise. Is it true the Lynn family benefited financially after her death? Her smile froze. Cameras flashed harder. My mother's hands trembled in her lap. That was my cue. The main screen behind them flickered. A logo appeared, Aurora. Then a video began to play. Not an ad. Not a fashion reel. Confession. My voice filled the hall. 3 years ago, a woman was declared dead after a car crash near the Lynn estate. But she didn't die. Gasps. Chairs scraped. My sister's face went white. The video cut to scanned copies of forged documents, contracts, will transfers, the fake accident report. Every signature they'd faked. Every lie they'd sold. This is proof, my voice continued, calm and steady, that the Lynn Empire stands on the grave of its own blood. Lena lunged for the microphone. This is absurd. That voice, it's an imitation. The crowd erupted. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. My mother stood, tears streaking her makeup. And then I stepped out of the shadows. Every flash turned toward me. The noise stopped. I removed my hat, my veil. The silence broke into gasps. Hello, little sister, I said softly. Her glass slipped, shattering against the floor. For a moment no one moved. No one breathed. It can't be, my mother whispered. But it was. I told you, I said, stepping closer. The dead don't always stay buried. Reporters surged forward, shouting my name. Cameras flashed like lightning. I let them. The world had buried me once. Now it could watch me rise. Lena tried to speak, but her voice cracked. How did you survive? I smiled. By remembering every lie you told. The questions flew. Where were you these 3 years? Did your family try to kill you? Will you press charges? I answered none of them. I only turned to my sister and whispered, You stole my life. Now watch me take it back. Security escorted me out amid chaos, but the damage was already done. Within hours the story went global. Dead heiress returns, Family empire in question. Lin Group under investigation for fraud and attempted murder. By nightfall, investors pulled funding. Stocks collapsed. The mansion that once glowed with gold light now sat behind locked gates in silence. I watched it all unfold from my hotel window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights. My phone rang. The number was unknown. I answered. A familiar voice, cold, shaking, desperate. "May, my sister. What do you want?" I asked. "Please," she whispered. "The company, the house. Everything's falling apart. The media won't stop. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." You'll what? I cut in. "Apologize. Dig another grave. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to bury me alive?" She fell silent. For the first time, I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Fear. "Please, May," she said again, weaker now. "Tell me what you want." I looked at my reflection, painted lips, diamond earrings, the ghost reborn. "I want my life back," I said quietly. "And my name." The line went dead. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. I poured myself a glass of wine, the same crimson shade as the roses blooming on my balcony. For years I dreamed of this night, their fall, my rise. But as lightning lit up the skyline, I realized revenge didn't feel like triumph. Felt like silence. Like standing at the edge of everything I'd lost, and realizing it would never come back. I pressed my hand against the window, whispering to the storm. They buried me in darkness. But I learned to shine there. Then I closed my eyes. Tomorrow the world would burn with my name. But tonight, I let the rain wash away what was left of the girl they thought had died. By morning, the Lin Empire was crumbling. The headlines screamed what the world already knew. Heiress returns from the dead. Lin Corporation under fraud investigation. Family legacy built on lies. Every hour brought another blow. Creditors froze accounts. Partners withdrew contracts. Reporters camped at the mansion gates like wolves waiting for the next drop of blood. And me? I watched from a quiet hotel room, wrapped in a silk robe, drinking tea that tasted like closure. I thought it would feel like victory. It didn't. Revenge isn't fireworks. It's quiet. Slow. The sound of someone else's laughter fading while you sit in silence, trying to remember what joy once felt like. The news anchor's voices blended into a low hum as footage played of my sister avoiding cameras, my mother fainting at the family's press conference. For 3 years I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. Not once did I imagine it would feel this hollow. When the knock came at my door that evening, I almost didn't answer. But the voice on the other side was calm, familiar. It's me. The man who had funded my rebirth, the investor whose name I still didn't know. He entered without a word, setting a folder on the table. "They're finished," he said simply. "You could end it completely now. Bankrupt them. Take every share, every property. Legally, it's all within your reach." I stared at the folder, my fingers trembling slightly. "I already took their piece," I said. "What's left to take?" He met my gaze. "Forgiveness." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think they deserve that?" "No," he said softly. "But you do." He left the folder on the table and walked to the window, his reflection blurring with mine in the glass. "You've been fighting ghosts for 3 years, May. Maybe it's time to start living." The word living hit harder than I expected. I turned away from him, looking instead at the storm gathering outside. Thunder rolled again, my eternal soundtrack. Later that night I couldn't resist. I drove to the mansion. The gates hung open. The jasmine bushes were trampled by reporters earlier that day. The house that once glowed with vanity now sat in darkness, its silence heavier than any grave. Inside, the marble floors were streaked with mud and footprints. Family portraits hung crooked on the walls, faces of people who'd forgotten what love was. I found Lena in Father's old office, sitting on the floor among scattered papers. Her once perfect hair was tangled, her makeup streaked. For a moment she looked like a little girl again, small, lost, terrified. When she saw me, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She just whispered, "You came." "I wanted to see what guilt looks like," I said quietly. She clutched a folder to her chest. "You've destroyed everything." "No, Lena. You did." Her tears fell fast. "You think I wanted this?" I was scared. You always had father's trust, the company, his love. I had nothing. You had choice, I said, stepping closer. And you chose to bury me. She shook her head violently. I never meant to kill you. But you did, I whispered. You killed the sister who believed in you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Then she handed me the folder she'd been holding. It was a letter. My father's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it. To my daughters, if this reaches you, know that I loved you both. The company means nothing compared to peace between you. Protect each other, even from yourselves. My knees went weak. Father hadn't known. He hadn't been part of it. All those years of hatred, all that fire in my chest. I'd been carrying it for a man who never deserved the blame. Tears burned my eyes before I could stop them. I looked at my sister, broken, trembling, human, and realized I'd already won. There was nothing left to prove. She whispered, "What are you going to do now?" I folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my coat. Leave you the ashes. When I walked out, the rain began again, gentle at first, then steady. The mansion behind me loomed like a tombstone. Beautiful, hollow, forgotten. I didn't look back. As I reached the gates, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the road ahead. My car waited, engine running. The investor sat inside, watching me through the rain. When I opened the door, he asked, "Is it over?" I shook my head slowly. "No. It's beginning." He raised a brow. "Beginning." I looked out the window, the storm's reflection flickering across my face. Vengeance built my world, but it won't sustain it. Now I have to rebuild for me. He smiled faintly. Then maybe for the first time you're really alive. As the car pulled away, I watched the mansion shrink in the rearview mirror until it vanished completely, swallowed by rain, by memory, by the past. And when I closed my eyes, I heard Father's voice again, faint but clear. Protect each other. Even from yourselves. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible, but I knew I was finally free to try. The morning after the storm, sunlight found its way through my hotel window for the first time in weeks. No thunder, no headlines, no phone calls, just stillness. I sat there for a long while, watching dust float through the gold light, and realized that quiet could be louder than revenge. The man who had helped me, the one who'd pulled me from anonymity into power, called that afternoon. "Pack a bag," he said simply. "There's something you should see." We drove for hours beyond the city, past the skyline that had once defined my entire world, until the road narrowed into open fields and wildflowers. It was my father's province, where the first Lin factory had been built decades ago. The car stopped near the ruins of an old warehouse. Children were laughing nearby, chasing a ball through puddles, their shoes splashing mud over the broken tiles. "This," he said, stepping out, "is where your father's workers used to make their living. The company abandoned them after he died. Your sister's management left the site to rot." I looked around. The walls were crumbling, the air heavy with the ghosts of labor and loss. "What if," he continued, "you built something new here, not for revenge but for purpose? A foundation. A future." I turned to him. "Why do you care so much about my choice?" He smiled faintly. "Because I've seen too many people destroy themselves chasing justice. You don't need to win against them, May. You already have. Now you can win for yourself." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat outside the small guest house we stayed in, wrapped in a blanket, listening to crickets. The stars above looked nothing like Paris or the city. They were sharper here, clearer, like truths too bright to ignore. For years I had lived for vengeance. Every step, every stitch, every diamond was sharpened for war. But standing here with the world finally quiet, I realized vengeance didn't heal. It only delayed the pain. Maybe it was time to build something that could outlive it. By morning I had made my choice. We bought the land. Not under the Lin name. Under mine. Construction began within weeks. It wasn't a factory. It was a training center for women who had nowhere to go. Widows, single mothers, forgotten daughters. The kind of women the world buried quietly, just as mine once tried to bury me. When the first sewing machines arrived, I ran my fingers along the cold metal and smiled. "This," I whispered, "is the sound of resurrection." News spread quickly. Aurora Foundation for Women. A beacon born from scandal. Critics called it charity for guilt. Others called it a miracle, called it home. One afternoon, as I supervised the workers, the man who had funded my rise walked in wearing his usual calm expression. "You've turned ghosts into architects," he said. "You kept your promise." I smiled. "No. I rewrote it." We walked through the workshop, watching women laugh and stitch and dream again. "You could have destroyed them completely," he said quietly. "You spared them." "I didn't do it for them," I replied. "I did it for the girl they buried. She deserved peace, not ashes." He nodded, eyes soft. "You've become the woman your father hoped for." For the first time in years, his words didn't sting. They settled. That evening, I returned to the city. I hadn't planned to, but something inside me needed closure. The Lin mansion stood silent, its gates half open. No cameras now. No guards. Inside, the halls smelled of dust and wilted jasmine. I found Lena in the garden, kneeling beside the dying flowers. Her face was pale, her movements slow. She didn't look up when I spoke. "I came to tell you it's over," I said. "You can keep what's left." "I don't want it." She let out a long, shaky breath. "You're not going to ruin us completely?" "No. You'll do that on your own." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why?" "Because I finally understand what Father meant when he said love is the hardest inheritance. I can't destroy what's already dead." She looked at me then, eyes red, voice trembling. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it. The nights buried alive, the years in shadows, the laughter that haunted me. Then I shook my head. "I used to," I said softly. "Now I pity you." She covered her face and sobbed. For once I didn't turn away. When I left, I didn't look back. Outside the gates, the man was waiting by the car. He handed me a single rose, the same shade of red as the first dress I ever designed. "Storm's over," he said. I nodded, holding the flower close. Storms end where love begins. As we drove away, the wind carried the scent of jasmine again, but this time it didn't hurt. It smelled like peace. A year passed before I realized that I had stopped counting time. When pain no longer marks the hours, life begins to move differently. Quieter, fuller, freer. The Aurora Foundation grew faster than I ever imagined. What started as a handful of sewing machines became a network of schools, shelters, and workshops across the country. Every woman there had her own version of my story: betrayal, loss, survival. But unlike me, they didn't have to rise alone. Every morning, I'd walk through the main building and hear laughter, the rhythmic hum of machines, and children's voices from the daycare downstairs. The sound healed something in me I didn't know was still bleeding. The media called me the woman reborn from her grave. I didn't mind the title anymore. It wasn't mockery. It was recognition that death doesn't always win. And through it all, he stayed beside me. The man who had once been a faceless investor, my silent savior, my mirror of purpose, became more than a name on contracts. He became a companion in rebuilding. He worked with the same quiet diligence I had once used to survive, helping with logistics, donations, and designs. We never spoke about love. We didn't need to. It was in every silence we shared, every small act of care. One evening, we attended a charity gala hosted by the city's mayor. My foundation was receiving an award for humanitarian impact. I wore a silver gown, simple, elegant, luminous under the soft lights. When the announcer called my name, the applause was thunderous. As I walked onto the stage, flashes of light filled my eyes. But this time they didn't blind me. They illuminated the path I had carved out of the dark. 3 years ago, I began, voice steady. I was declared dead. Tonight, I stand here not because I was saved, but because I chose to live. The hall went silent. Everything I lost taught me that pain isn't the opposite of strength. It's the proof of it. Every woman here carries her own storm. I just want to tell you, storms end. Always. The crowd rose to their feet. The sound filled the room like an ocean. When I stepped down, he was waiting at the foot of the stage, holding a small velvet box. I froze. He smiled almost shyly. I was going to wait until tomorrow, but I think the moment's right. He opened it. Inside wasn't a ring of gold or diamonds. It was my old wallet, restored, polished, with my initials re-engraved in gold. Inside it, a single folded photograph of us standing with the women of the foundation, surrounded by sunlight. "I don't want to give you something that binds you," he said softly. I want to return something that's yours. I felt tears blur my vision. You found this? He nodded. It was among your things when we first met. You said once that everything precious had been taken from you. I think it's time you took it back. The applause around us faded. For a moment, the whole world shrank to his eyes and the sound of my heartbeat. He slipped the wallet into my hands, then knelt, not in a grand gesture, but with quiet reverence. May, he said, his voice trembling, I don't want to rescue you. I just want to walk beside you. May I? I laughed through my tears. You already have. He stood, and the crowd erupted again as he pulled me into an embrace. Reporters later said that moment was the most photographed of the night. But what they couldn't capture was the peace in my chest. The calm that comes when you finally stop running from your past and start walking toward your future. Weeks later, the Lynn Corporation officially dissolved. Its remaining assets were transferred into the Aurora Foundation. Half of every profit went to feeding orphan girls. The other half built homes for women starting over. When I visited one of our newest centers, a little girl ran up to me with paint-stained hands. Miss May, she said shyly, is it true you were buried once? I knelt and smiled. Yes, but I dug my way out. Wasn't it dark? She asked. It was, I whispered. But sometimes you have to walk through darkness to learn how to shine. She grinned. Then I'll shine too. Her words echoed in my mind as I stood by the window that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time, the sunset didn't remind me of endings. It reminded me of beginnings. Later that night, we hosted a small gathering at the foundation. The women sang, laughed, and toasted under strings of warm lights. I looked around and realized something simple yet profound. I wasn't haunted anymore. My story had changed shape, from a tragedy whispered behind closed doors to a tale that gave others courage to rise. When the music faded, he took my hand. You've done it, he said. I smiled. No. We did. Outside, rain began to fall softly, gentle, cleansing, almost familiar. I closed my eyes, letting it touch my face, and whispered, I'm finally home. He looked at me, smiling. Home isn't a place, May. It's a peace you've earned. I leaned against him, watching the droplets turn to glitter under the lanterns. And for the first time since the night they buried me, I believed him. 3 years ago, they buried a naive girl beneath rain and greed. Tonight, I'm sitting in a glass penthouse above the same city, listening to the same rain, watching it slide down the windows like melted silver. It no longer sounds like mourning. Sounds like forgiveness. The world below glows with lights and life. Somewhere out there, people are hurrying home, chasing dreams, making mistakes, breaking hearts, and healing them again. I used to envy them, the living. Now I'm one of them again. I light a single candle on my desk, the flame trembling in the draft, and open the small leather notebook I've kept since Paris. On the first page are 4 words written in my old hand. Don't let them win. I smile. They didn't. But the victory doesn't look the way I imagined. For a long time I thought revenge was justice. I believed that if I burned everything that hurt me, the ashes would warm me somehow. But ashes are cold. Only compassion gives heat. The Lynn name no longer belongs to wealth. It belongs to hope. Our foundation carries it now, feeding, teaching, mending. When people say the Lynn sisters, they no longer picture scandal. They picture survival. Lena lives quietly on the coast. Sometimes she sends handwritten letters, not apologies, just memories. I haven't answered them yet, but I keep them in a drawer. Maybe forgiveness isn't words. Maybe it's the silence that no longer hurts. The man beside me, my partner, my peace, sleeps lightly on the couch, a book still open on his chest. He never asks about the grave or the night that birthed me again. He only reminds me to eat breakfast, to laugh more, to rest. Love, I've learned, doesn't demand confession. It gives permission to heal, to breathe, to begin again. Sometimes I visit my father's grave. I bring fresh jasmine and sit for hours. The first time, I asked him if he'd forgive me for turning his company into something unrecognizable. The wind rustled the leaves then, as if he were laughing. I think he already has. People often call me strong. But strength isn't surviving the grave. It's choosing, after you climb out, to plant flowers there instead of curses. I run my fingers over the candlelight's edge, watching the diamonds on my wrist catch the glow. Each one was mine from the mud of my past, pain, betrayal, rebirth. They don't blind anymore. They remind. I used to think storms came to destroy. Now I know they come to cleanse. They strip away everything false until only truth remains. So this is my truth. I am Mei Lin. I was buried alive by those I loved. I returned not to destroy them, but to remember myself. And somewhere between rage and grace, I found a way to live again. If you ever find yourself in darkness, don't beg the world to dig you out. The light is already inside you, waiting for your hands to move the earth. Rise. Even if your knees tremble. Rise and let them see the sparkle they tried to hide. That was my story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share yours too. Because somewhere, someone is still buried, waiting to see that dawn is real.